Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guan. This week we focus on the Jiangsu Super League 2.0. What keeps the provincial level amateur football league so popular in China? What's new in Season 2? To unpack the questions, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Fu Yu and Brandon Yates. Alright, the Jiangsu Football City League, also known as the Jiangsu Super League, is officially back. Maybe Season 1 was a surprise hit last season, but now with the Season 2 underway, the passion from the fans and the communities seems even stronger. The tickets were sold out very quickly for the first round games. So Fu Yu, from your perspective, what's keeping this momentum alive? Why hasn't the buzz faded?
Okay, first of all, about the tickets. There are so many people going for the tickets that you actually have to win a lottery in order to buy a ticket.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's how popular it is. It did so well, I think, because it's a football tournament for everyone. Of course, they are all amateur players, but there's a very low threshold for someone to register. Doesn't matter what profession you are. Doesn't even matter if you're the best player. We've seen some of these players, they are students, teachers, firefighters, and food delivery men.
Yeah.
So we celebrate that diversity. So that's one of the reasons why so many people...
It's a real mix.
Yes. Why so many people follow this Super League. It's a platform or an outlet for these people to experience what a real football match is like. I'm pretty sure a lot of these people don't get many chances to play football at such scale.
Not everyone can join Real Madrid, I mean.
Then they may not even have access to a standard football pitch.
Yeah.
Speaking about this success, we can't forget about the audience. There's also a low threshold for the audience. Tickets are priced at 10 yuan last season. Yeah. Very, very affordable.
Yeah, it's like a bus ticket in London.
Yeah, and for a lot of these people, it's just a chance to have some fun, to enjoy themselves, whether they're attending the games in stadiums or watching at home. They can just enjoy what's happening on the pitch.
Yeah.
They don't even need a ton of football knowledge to be able to enjoy a game.
Yeah, I think it's really a platform to allow the ordinary people to realize their football dreams. It's a really low threshold amateur football league that outshines, I would say, the Chinese Super League to some extent. Yeah. Brandon, from your perspective, what's the secret source of this league? Anything you can relate to? Is it the local pride, raw grassroots energy, or something else that the bigger leagues are missing?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Chinese Super League, which I think is, definitely from my time in Beijing, it's definitely rebounding, after the post-financial crisis. But I think something that may have been lost during that period, and since the Chinese Super League has been trying to bounce back, it maybe lost a bit of that strong city-based emotional attachment that I think is incredibly vital in football. And the Super League has definitely reversed that, so you're having a lot of very intense city versus city clashes. There's definitely strong civic pride as well. And of course, you've got heavy local media amplification, because I think a lot of these, smaller towns and cities and that sort of thing that don't often get a lot of, press attention for hosting major events or anything like that, because they are taking part in a new event that has garnered so much national attention. When that national hype gets around to their city or to their town, there's just so much positive noise around it that I think it really boosts the profile of that town, so all that city or whatever it may be. So and that may not necessarily get attention from tourism or from sport or whatever it may be. So it's also just a chance to showcase what different regions and towns and provinces of China have to offer. So I think it also kind of, in an interesting way, mirrors lower league success models in Europe, where there's hyper local pride versus like national branding. It's a lot more personal, it's a lot more interesting and unique and very diverse, like you guys have already mentioned. So I think it really does tick a lot of boxes that all different sorts of sports fans enjoy. It's like people that you would see at your local store. at your dentist, or, your colleague at work.
Speaking of that, sorry to jump in. I believe this is from last season, or I'm not so sure. There's a restaurant owner who is a player in the Su Super League, and he closes his restaurant at 2 a.m. and goes to training.
Yeah, so I think that's what's appealing, right? For sports fans, it's easy enough to support a football club, right? But when you're supporting a football team that really represents you, or like has people that you know and see on a daily basis in it, it brings in a whole different element. Like for you, like you mentioned. I mean, can you imagine like having a restaurant order from somebody, and then the next day seeing that owner that you have a good relationship with, like performing in front of like thousands of fans, and you being able to sit there and cheer for somebody that you see on like a weekly basis. It must be the most incredible experience. I think that's a part of the high engagement level that we're seeing on social media, in person, on standard media as well, like radio, television, etc. So the coverage of it has just been absolutely incredible. There was probably a concern that it might have been a one-hit wonder, that this was going to be something that would be difficult to sustain or grow. And I think 2026 has proved that completely wrong. I think if anything, it's gotten even bigger this year than it was last year. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. So the bottom line for me is that the Su Super League, it's not just a league, it's a content ecosystem and a civic identity platform. And I think that's why it's important, is that like there's people that really identify with what's going on. There's so many different elements of it that make it popular with all sorts of people, not just hardened football fans or sports fans. There's so many different storylines and underdog stories, and there's so many different elements that make it popular for all types of people. And I think the content distribution using different storylines has got that right to bring in more and more people to get involved with the popularity of the Su Super League. So I think the way that it's growing and the way that it's being sustained is very interesting to watch at the moment, and I think it's going to continue and grow even more.
Right, and that's a very good summary. Practically speaking, the Su Super League's competitive level is actually way below, let's say, China's third-tier professional league. The matches are full of mistakes and are played at half of the speed of the CSL, I would say. But the passion from the communities and the atmosphere are unmistakable. You can feel it from TV. I still think the local identity is the key here. The players, the coaches, the staff members, even the sponsors all come from your hometown. It's a team that you can connect with if you live in Jiangsu. I think for similar reasons why, the World Cup outshines the Champions League in popularity. The national pride makes it easier to relate to for ordinary fans. But this year's Su Super League has gone through some changes, and for example, it's noticeably younger. Every team is required to have at least 6 U22 players make appearance in one game. That's a bold move, I would say. That might be a sign that the league is evolving into a serious talent pipeline, or even maybe a semi-pro development league in China. But on the other side of the coin, what happens to those grassroots veterans? We know a lot of factories workers, local legends, retired and old amateurs participated in the league last year, and they really gave the league its soul. So for you, if younger players are taking over, will those original heroes lose minutes? Will we lose the original taste of the league?
I think with these younger players stepping in, definitely some of the veterans will get less field time. But I don't think it's such a big issue, because for them, participation is important. Like we always say here in China, participation is more important than victory, which I don't always agree. But in this case, I believe it's a win for anyone who made it here. And speaking of new rules this season, I like the way you put it. It could become a talent pipeline or a stepping stone into professional football. It's not quite there yet, but I hope someday it'll play this role. It's never too late to start. Although traditionally in China, the way up in football is you start early, you go through training, and there's a hierarchy that you have to climb up. But in this case, at the Su Super League, anyone can become a hero. Although these are amateur football players, you never know what they will bring to the football pitch. I think that's one interesting aspect. It makes it as entertaining as it is competitive.
Right. Personally, I'd like to see, more amateurs taking part in the league. It's how it started and it's how it got famous, and it should be kept that way.
Yes.
But if Jiangsu turns into a very successful youth training hub, cultivating China's future Messi and Ronaldo, with this adjustment of the league, I think everyone will thumb up on this. Maybe the Super League is creating a path no one has ever taken, in Chinese football development.
Yeah.
Brandon, what do you make of this change of the Super League? Is this a necessary trade-off for professionalism, or are we risking what made the league so special in the first place?
It's like anything in life. I think ultimately it's going to be a balancing act, and I think that's the most important thing. There definitely needs to be a priority placed on development goals, because I think if you're looking at China's long-term football ambitions, number one is to return to the World Cup, of course, but also at the same time balancing that with the community participation goals. So having that open model that has made the league so popular. Put it this way, I think the organizers are very well aware of what has made this competition popular, right? I don't think they are under any mindset that like, oh, we can do whatever we want with this league and it will remain popular and like the people would enjoy whatever rules we put in place. I don't think that that's the mentality. I think they are trying to figure out a way to get the most out of this league in terms of participation, youth developments. I think there's so many elements of the league that can really benefit a large variety of Chinese society as opposed to just youth development. But just looking at the 6U22 player rule on its own, like let's just focus on that. Like I think, well, let me finish it this way. I don't think that they will ever get to a point where the community element ever gets phased out or where the youth development becomes more important than the community development. I don't think that will ever happen. But I think just to focus on this particular rule, I think it is an interesting installment because, and I know, Yang Guang, you know how I love to bring it back to South African rugby because we've got a we've got a very similar system here. So, like you mentioned, the traditional path for professional, not just footballers, for professional athletes, is to get identified at a very young age, go through the systems, the under 16, under 21, semi-professional, professional, etc., etc. But there are a lot of athletes that miss out on that, or only kind of find their way to playing their best later in life. Some athletes only realize that they are able to be professionals in their early 20s or even mid 20s. So in South Africa, we have a similar thing where obviously we've got the professional team, so we've got provincial professional teams where they're paid athletes, and those guys generally get selected to play for the national team. And then of course we've also got the players that get identified at youth level, and then they represent their provinces at like under 13, under 16, under 18, under 21, and then go into the professional provinces and then ultimately get selected for the national team. But because rugby is such a religion in South Africa and there are so many people that play all across South Africa, some talent either kind of falls by the wayside and doesn't get discovered because they play for a small school or they don't go to the national trials or whatever it may be, or scouts miss out on them because they're playing in some random province where nobody ever watches rugby, or where talent doesn't generally come from. So what we have is that we've got two things. So we've got obviously this high school rugby where generally people get identified there to get filtered into the sort of semi-professional and then professional system, but we've also got university rugby. So guys that don't get identified in high school, that don't sign professional contracts and they just go to university. It doesn't mean they're all of a sudden not great rugby players anymore, but they go into they go into university to try and get a degree, but they continue playing rugby, and that university league is televised and it's also incredibly popular, probably as popular as our professional leagues, and a lot of talent gets identified there. And I mean, like for example, our national team now, our senior national team that has just won 2 World Cups in a row, I would say half of that team got discovered either from university rugby, so they only kind of became professionals in their early 20s or mid 20s, or they were discovered in club rugby. So we also have a very, very popular non-professional, non-paid club rugby system in South Africa where a lot of amateurs, from the ages of 17 to like 45, 50, are all playing together, and that's also incredibly popular. And a lot of talent also gets plucked out there And I think the Sioux Super League has the potential to have a system where youngsters get identified and then eventually make their way up to the Chinese national football team. But I think this under 22 rule might broaden that selection pool and maybe expose talent that wasn't necessarily identified early on, balancing the professional elements and trying to identify talent, but also getting youth involved in the community sort of setup and, interacting with amateurs and that sort of thing. I think it's a good balancing act. So from the community side of things, keeping older people and younger people involved, and then on the younger side of things, identifying talent that might not have found its way into the system and they may become professionals later on in life. So I think it's kind of like a two birds with one stone situation. It definitely needs to be managed because it can't become too extreme, and we don't want the Super League to become like too rules based and too professionalized and very kind of straight laced and very monitored and regulated. But we also don't want it to just have like no rules at all. So I think that if this is kind of monitored, I think it really can benefit multiple elements of sporting and community involvement in China. And I think this is the first step of that.
Right. In that sense, with a more appropriate comparison, rather than cultivating China's future, Messi and Ronaldo, maybe the Sioux Super League will produce the future Jamie Vardy, because he also started with amateur football. All right, before we move on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week.
Chelsea has sacked manager Liam Rosenior following a catastrophic run of form while they endured their worst goal-scoring drought in over a century. Rosenier's dismissal came a day after a humiliating 3-0 loss at Brighton, which saw the South Coast club leapfrog Chelsea into 6th place in the table.
I think the players as well need to have a look in the mirror for what they put in and talk about tactics. Tactics come after the basics. Having moral courage to play, winning duels, winning headers, tackles, conceding terrible goals. That was an unacceptable performance tonight.
Rosenior lasted less than 4 months in the role, becoming the latest casualty of Chelsea's turbulent season after 7 defeats in their last 8 matches across all competitions. Manchester City ended Arsenal's 6-month stay on the Premier League summit and condemned Burnley to relegation with a laboured 1-0 away victory. After reeling Arsenal in, City now lead the table on goals scored, with both sides on 70 points and an identical goal difference of plus 37. Serge Gnabry will miss the FIFA World Cup after the Bayern Munich midfielder suffered a torn thigh muscle, ruling him out of the tournament. Meantime, Bayern has reached the German Cup final after a 2-0 win at Bayer Leverkusen midweek. The NBA has named Victor Wembanyama Defensive Player of the Year.
I feel like I'm closing a chapter in my life. I think those close to me also feel that this is the end, but also the beginning of a new phase.
The San Antonio Spurs center received a perfect 100 first-place votes to unanimously win the prestigious award. The FIBA Hall of Fame has inducted Chinese basketball icon Wang Zhizhi as part of the prestigious class of 2026. Wang, selected 36th overall by the Dallas Mavericks in the 1999 NBA draft, made history as the first Chinese player to step onto an NBA court in 2001. In a standout night for tennis, Carlos Alcaraz and Aryna Sabalenka took home the prestigious Laureus World Sportsman and Sportswoman of the Year awards.
Thanking all the fans, the love that I receive everywhere that I go is incredible. And it gives me the strength and motivation to keep going, to keep working hard, and to keep enjoying this sport that I love so much.
When I see the list of the winners from the previous years, makes me feel a little bit crazy to know that my name is going to be next to those legends.
On the team front, Paris Saint-Germain basked in glory as Laureus World Team of the Year. Meanwhile, Formula One's Lando Norris, fresh off winning the World Drivers' Championship, claimed the breakthrough of the year. The 6th Asian Beach Games has opened in China's tropical resort city of Sanya. The games have drawn nearly 1,800 athletes. It marks the first time Hainan has hosted a continental-level beach sports event.
Welcome back. Ever since the Sioux Super League stole the spotlight last year in China, similar city-based football leagues have popped up in other provinces, from Jiangxi to Inner Mongolia, from Guangdong to Yunnan. So, Fu Yu, why is everyone jumping on this bandwagon? And most importantly, is this model sustainable?
Yeah, I think so many regions in China are following Jiangsu's model, and the biggest reason is it has such commercial value. For example, this season in the opening round, there were 4 matches, and it was an overall full attendance. And for some matches, there were as many as 28,000 people. That compares to a match in Serie A. A lot of people going there, it creates huge demand for consumption.
Yeah.
And also, I'd like to say, although there are other regions that have got their own similar football leagues, Jiangsu is still the number one. I think because of its economic power. Let me give you an idea of Jiangsu province. Is on China's east coast next to Shanghai, and last year the province's per capita GDP ranked 3rd in China, only after Beijing and Shanghai. So that means it's a well-developed province. It's got good infrastructure and good services. All the host cities have got high standard stadiums and supporting facilities.
Yeah.
And when a lot of people go to these matches, there's demand for dining, for hotels, parking, transportation. These all generate income. And so it's a good driver for boosting consumption.
Yeah, the solid infrastructure is definitely one of the reasons why the Su Super League got so successful in the first place, and the success continues. And I agree that the big driver behind this Super League heat across China is economy. I mean, the Su Super League tells people sports brings people together. But the economic factors aside, I'm just glad that football is becoming something that Chinese people are more willing to try to play rather than just to watch from TV. Finally, let's talk about the big surprise from the Su Super League last season, the big economic powerhouses, Changzhou, Suzhou, and Wuxi.
Especially Changzhou. They did so badly that people are making fun of them.
Yeah, of course, that raised eyebrows. And this year, the balance of power seems to be shifting. For example, in the opening round, last season's second bottom side, Changzhou thrashed last year's runner-up Nantong 3-0 in the season opener. My question here, Brandon, is that is there a real link between a city's wealth and its competitiveness on the pitch? If economic hubs like Changzhou and Wuxi start dominating the league, what does they say about the league's future? More professional or more predictable?
At this level, I don't know if money is the biggest element. I think at a grassroots, semi-pro level, success depends more on local football culture, coaching networks, player cohesion and community engagement, not just GDP and infrastructure alone, right? So I think why maybe some richer cities may have initially struggled, maybe because of a more fragmented talent pool. So, players are spread across institutions and, it is kind of difficult to get them together, and maybe less of a hunger factor. So that's another thing to consider, is that these smaller communities with a lower GDP or that are kind of less financially powerful, they may have that sort of underdog fire in their belly to really show the richer cities that they can, come in and cause a scene, which I think is very big in any sport. I know, for example, I always bring it back to rugby, but I know when you get like a very rich, powerful school, that's private and has like a high school fees that other schools can't afford, and they come up, those like
grassroots
smaller schools come up against the rich schools. They really want to show those rich schools that, like, we can really beat you. So the rich schools always hated playing against the smaller schools from lower income communities, because they knew they were in for a really hard time. So I think there is maybe a little bit of that as well, where like the smaller town teams really want to show the bigger cities who's boss. But yeah, I think maybe why there's improvement now, and I think why it's going to become a little bit more of an even playing field is that I think there's definitely better organization now after year one lessons. I think that's incredibly important for the league as a whole. I think there's also definitely stronger recruitment systems from my understanding, is that I think because of the popularity now, there definitely does seem to be a bit more of a a structured format when it comes to recruitment. And, I think that, again, the under-22 player rule kind of assists with that as well. I think it definitely does create some sort of a structure in terms of identifying talent and recruiting people to play in the league, which I think is incredibly important. And like we've already mentioned, there's been increased investments, not just, in terms of just sponsorships and overall investment into the league, but things improved investment in scouting and coaching as well, which I think is not important just for the league, but also for like we've already mentioned, the development of Chinese football as a whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see how the Super League will evolve and what interesting stories can it offer in the following months. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.